Now, with COP28, started off with some early success. There was the Climate Disaster Fund. Now that we're 2 weeks out, what did you make of all that has been accomplished?
A great question. Look, usually at these COPs, you see a flurry of announcements all the way from the beginning through to the end. And as the conference draws to a close, it's natural that the attention turns to the final political wording. It's also normal that as you get to that close and you get 200 countries to agree, you're never going to get the most strongly worded agreement out of that. As investors, what's more important to us than the actual political agreement itself is the feeling on the ground. When we're talking to other investors, when we're talking to industry, to businesses, we're getting a feeling of transition, of transformation. And what we believe is really driving this transition, energy transition, environmental transition, is not just these political agreements, but much more so the simple economics of moving to a renewable, electrified, more energy productive economic system.
What signals is COP sending to the capital markets?
Well, again, when you're talking to industry and businesses, one of the words we don't hear so much anymore is this concept of hard to abate. The idea that there are certain sectors that are just impossible to transition, to decarbonize. Actually, when we are talking to business leaders, the feeling you're getting is that we know now what the solutions are. We know what the roadmap looks like towards a net zero and ultimately more nature positive economy. The real question to us as investors is how do we get there? Who's going to get there first? Who's best positioned to take advantage of some of these shifts in value chains and shifts in profit pools as well, as you get quite a profound transformation of an extractive towards a more renewable and regenerative economic model.
Now, when we talk about all the countries and the responses to the results of COP28, what about countries like China? And they are a top greenhouse gas emitter. What would you make of how China, of course, they are big on EVs and the #1 EV market in the world, but what is their contribution here?
Well, indeed, if we think of this as an industrial revolution, which is the way we should think about it, it becomes very clear that certain countries, including China, have a very key role to play in this transition. And we've been seeing that in the leading role that some of these markets have played in electric vehicles, in batteries, in renewable equipment. There's still production or installation of new coal plants. There's even more installation today of renewables. And that is a trend that we're seeing across the globe. We believe this tipping point has in fact been reached, where in the vast majority of markets today, renewables are starting to beat on simple economics, traditional fossil fuel-based sources of power. As we move towards this transition, what we're going to see is also the international scale reconfiguration of value chains and a bit of a competitive race as to who can actually get there first in terms of supplying some of the key products, the technologies, the solutions that globally we're going to need and that are going to be scaled up as part of this transition. And we believe potentially some of these markets, including in China and other Asian countries, are very well positioned to supply not only their domestic markets, but also international ones.